Hey guys, it's Jeremy, Classic Guitar Rock channel, and I just wanted to go live because I've never gone live on my mobile device. And one of the things we're talking about with the podcast is to get the podcast a video version, right? That we can live stream on YouTube or whatever platforms we want to. So I kind of want to just get familiar with the platform and the technology, but also a big deal happened on this date way back in 1974. That was the debut of a little album from a band from the Great White North that we know and love as Rush. So it was on March 1st, 1974 that the album was released. Now there's some interesting little tidbits about this. Everything says that it was March 1st of 74. Other things I see make it look more like it was in the summer of 74 that the album was released. And it could be one of those deals where it was released and yet didn't really start getting distributed till later. But the official release date of the first Rush album is today's date, March 1st, 1974. Now, of course, the lineup was a little different. 1974, it featured Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, who had been buddies since grade school, had been playing together since they were like 14, 15 years old in a band. And of course, the original drummer was John Rutsey. The first Rush album was really, I don't want to say they were Zeppelin clones, but they were definitely big Zeppelin fans. And that is reflected in the music of that first album. But man, there's some classics on that album. Working Man, Finding My Way, In the Mood. Just a good rock album. In fact, I listened to it just about a week ago, and that was the first time I'd listened to it front to back in probably 20 years. And I'd forgotten how good that album was. So do yourself a favor, go stream it, go listen to that first Rush album. Rush is one of those bands because we've got such a long history of them, right? They, from 74 until 2011, 2012, they were consistently putting out albums. There were a few couple year gaps in there, but for the most part, consistently every year or so, you'd see a new record from Rush. And more than any other band I can think of, they changed so much over that amount of time. I mean, you listen to the first album, compare it to the last album they put out, you can't hardly tell it's the same band. I mean, the only common thread really sonically is Geddy Lee. You could tell it's the same singer, maybe, but everything else is so different. And it's all good. It's all good. It just changed and morphed over the years. Our last episode of the podcast, we talked about Alex Lifeson, and really in the context of his rhythm playing and what I call his, being a texturalist, one of those guitarists that's really into not just the screaming fast leads, but into creating these sonic textures. And Alex Lifeson was one of the best at that. And you really see that. You really see this huge evolution throughout their career, especially, I think, in Alex's sound. They brought in keyboards, and that changed the sound in the late 70s and throughout the 80s. But you really see in Alex's sound just a massive change over the years. But, me personally, and Rush is probably my all-time favorite band, and that's the band that I tend to go back to more often than any other band. But it's really up to about Presto, which came out in '89. I own all the albums on vinyl up to Presto. I might have Roll the Bones and Counterparts on CD somewhere. I think I do downstairs. But it was really up to about '89 that I was a big Rush fan. And not that I didn't like, well, yeah, their stuff after Presto just didn't appeal to me in the same way. It lost some of its, it almost got overly sophisticated and produced and began to sound more and more like pop albums. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it didn't have the same visceral connection that the earlier stuff did. And there were some Power Windows, for instance, isn't one of my favorite albums. There's a couple good songs on there. And then what's the one after Power Windows? Is it Force 10? No, Force 10. That's a song on Hold Your Fire, which came out in, I think, 87 or 88. Those two, Power Windows, Hold Your Fire, were kind of, at least to me, really kind of softening up and losing some of the power. It kind of came back with Presto. I thought that was great. But then Roll the Bones was kind of eh. And after that, I just kind of, while I still love the band and love their early catalog, it was just, I wanted to like all their new stuff, but I couldn't. I couldn't enjoy it as much as I did. Not to say they weren't still very talented, very phenomenal musicians, but it just didn't have the same appeal to me. And if I were to pinpoint my favorite albums, man, you look at, it's an incredible 5-album run from 2112 up through Moving Pictures. I mean, think about those albums: 2112, Farewell to Kings, Hemispheres, Permanent Waves, Moving Pictures. All 5 are excellent albums, and they're kind of. I was going to say bookend, but to be honest, I shouldn't say bookend. Fly By Night's a great album. Caress of Steel, which came after Fly By Night, not one of their best. Definitely the weakest album of their first 10 or 12 albums. But then Signals came after Moving Pictures. To follow up Moving Pictures would have been an insurmountable task for just about anyone. But I love Signals. Signals is a great album, but it's not Moving Pictures. But 2112 through Moving Pictures, for my money, the greatest 5-album run of any band anywhere. And of course, that features what I call the bathrobe era, right? Which is really, really, Farewell to Kings, Hemispheres, 2112. That's quintessential bathrobe era Rush. When they're literally, wearing bathrobes and kimonos on stage. That to me, that's the quintessential Rush that you got to listen to. But anyways, I digress. I wanted to call out that first Rush album because that started it off. And, WMMS, that radio station, in North American radio station, was it out of Detroit? Can't remember. Detroit, Minneapolis. And the lady's name escapes me, but there was a disc jockey there that jumped on Working Man as soon as it came out, played the crap out of it, and that really helped launch Rush in the U.S. And then, of course, they had a few, as supporting bands. They opened for Ted Nugent. They opened for Kiss. It's so fascinating to look at the old concert bills from back then to see these great lineups. You might see Rush and UFO and Kiss and Blue Oyster Cult all on the same bill, and it's unbelievable. It's like the golden age of classic rock. But they played in those support roles for years and years, opened for bands like Uriah Heep, opened for bands that they obviously would leapfrog in a short amount of time and would become the top bill. But what an education for the band. And of course, Neil coming in for Fly By Night. And that really kind of changed the trajectory of the band at that point. So I'm celebrating Rush today, listening to that first album, which means, of course, after I listen to this, I got to go listen to Fly By Night, and I got to do this. So I'll be listening to Rush all afternoon and enjoying it. And I wanted to pop on here, say hello, test out going live on my phone, and invite you to check out the podcast, Classic Guitar Rock Podcast. It's available on all the major platforms. And I'll direct you to our last episode that I mentioned earlier, where we talk in depth about Alex Lifeson and his contribution. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you for watching the YouTube channel. Thank you for checking out the podcast. And we'll see you next time. We'll see you. Bye-bye.